Never seen a team have the type of home-road discrepancy this Celtics team has. They have been terrible on the road. They've been outscored by about a dozen points a game on the road. They've outscored their opponent by about a dozen points a game at home, a more than 20-point swing. Undefeated at home as opposed to one win on the road, and that one win was a escape in overtime against Philly, a game Philly kind of gave away at the end. Some of it is young players play better at home. Some of it is the other team's role players don't play as well on the road. But some of it, I hate to have this type of analysis, is some magic in the Garden right now. Like, I don't know if it's the crowd or the city or the history or the banners, but those guys are playing better than their talent and experience would dictate every single time they go back home.
Yeah, the only thing I can really compare it to is the run that Seattle and Pete Carroll has been on. We haven't seen a team that's been that dominant at home, and then when they go on the road, they're a totally different team. Now, what we're not used to seeing is, because we've seen teams be dominant. We saw the Warriors be dominant the last 3 years in the playoffs, but we haven't seen a team that was not a great basketball team be as dominant at home as we've seen the Boston Celtics. Like, you typically see a legendary player, you know, a once-a-decade type player playing on teams like this, especially in the NBA. Like, you just don't see that combination of role players being as dominant, running off 10 in a row. It's one of the most impressive things that has happened this whole playoffs, Jenna, is their ability to be undefeated at home.
It wouldn't stand out as much if the Cavs were able to play at least a little bit better on the road. But because there's been such a discrepancy for both teams only winning at home, that's sort of where you put this.
But here's why I give Boston credit. The Cavs in the first-round series against Indiana, they won road games. In the second-round series, they won, obviously, both road games in Toronto. Like, it's not as if the Cavs had been some terrible road team. Now, we can pick apart the flaws on the Cavs, but those flaws, for the most part, have been present at home or on the road in the other series they've played. The Cavs got blown out in Game 1 at home of the Pacers series. Like, they've been hot and cold irrespective of where the game is being played. Boston, it's unbelievable. And it was true in the Milwaukee series. It was true in the Philadelphia series, and it's been true in this series. And that is why, as confident as I am in LeBron James in a Game 7, which is where I think the series will go, that's why the Celtics shouldn't be scared. Nobody's gone there and beaten them yet. Nobody's gone there and beaten them yet in this postseason.
Well, we saw what just happened to the Warriors, so it can happen.
Of course.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Boston beat them in Game 6 in Cleveland. It's not like that's a shoo-in. All right, Boston's a better team. They played a lot better in game number 4. All right, so I wouldn't be surprised if Boston was able to get that win in Cleveland.
All right. The Western Conference Finals resumes tonight in Houston. Warriors-Rockets. That series is tied at 2 games apiece. Working in the Rockets' favor, home court advantage. Also, Warriors were without Andre Iguodala in Game 4, while Klay Thompson injured his knee in that game as well. Both listed as questionable for tonight. Here's Draymond Green on the Warriors' mindset heading into a crucial Game 5.
Kind of pissed off. You know we let one slip away. So definitely guys are pissed off, but encouraged as well. I love the way this team responds when our back is against the wall. I don't mind our backs being against the wall because I know, what we're capable of, and I know the level of focus and intensity level that this team's bring when that is the case. So, it is what it is. I think we blew a golden opportunity, but it's not one that we can't get back. We know we can go get it back, so it's no panic.
All right, guys, what do we expect to see tonight from this one? CC?
I expect to see a great basketball game. I expect to see a follow-up of the great contest that we saw in game number 4 there in Oakland. The energy of the crowd in Houston is going to be very, very important. I just went back to game number 4 where Golden State got out to that big lead and wasn't able to get 18, 20-point lead. I'm interested to see how the crowd, how they respond. Now we're down to the best 2 or 3. Momentum is clearly in Houston's favor. Game number 1, I think they took that for granted, and they got smacked by the Warriors. You have to realize the champion is injured, not knocked out, just injured. So beware of that, and I expect immediately for Houston and the crowd to give them the type of welcome that a championship These are the types of things that you build a championship off of. They've shortened the season to what they want. Now it is basically a best of 3 series. The way the organization has talked about, you have it.
So listen, I've talked a lot from the Rockets' perspective. Part of that comes from the time I've spent living in Houston or the connection I have with the team, whether it be the owner or the GM. I want to talk about the Warriors for a second here, okay? These two guys on the screen behind Chris Carter, Steph Curry and Kevin Durant. That's 3 of the last 4 awarded MVPs. Those are guys that I think most people consider that when it's all said and done will go down as 2 of the 25 best players in the history of the sport. Most people consider them 2 of the 3 best players in the sport active today. Both those guys were disastrous for their team in the 4th quarter of Game 4, their biggest game of the season. Steph was 1 of 8. KD was 1 for 5, and his biggest miss was the shot he didn't take at the end of that game when Steph didn't even get the ball at the end of that game. This is also the first time since the Warriors acquired Kevin Durant they've played a game with any real stakes. You can say, oh, well, what about the NBA Finals? Man, they were the heavy favorites. They dominated Game 1. They dominated Game 2. Even if the one close game in the Finals, Game 3, even if they lose that, they're still up 2-1. I guess you could say that had some stakes, but this is the most adversity this team as a unit, as the current iteration of the Warriors has faced. I would argue it's the only adversity this iteration of the Warriors have faced. I want to see how they show up. Is Steph Curry going to be more than a 3rd quarter player, as he's been in this series? Is Kevin Durant going to be able to continue his dominant isolation scoring, but not do what he did in the first 2 games, which is 75 points with 1 assist? Is KD going to take on the challenge with Iggy either out or hampered? Guess what? I'm going to be the 2-way guy that I was at the beginning of the year. Dominant defender and dominant scorer. Those are the guys I want to watch tonight. Those are the guys I want to see tonight.
How much of the way Game 4 ended with KD not taking that shot, does that help them or does that hurt them? Does that motivate KD to get right back out there? Or was it deflating in that they had that game locked up in the 3rd quarter and let it slip away?
I believe it plays on their psyche. When you start questioning what you're doing on the court in pressure situation, then your judgment, your timing, are you natural? Are you thinking about what happened? All those things can be real, but Kevin Durant is a great prolific scorer. You can't get that possession back. All they can just try to do is win this game. If they're able to win this game, they're still in the same position that they were in. I don't want to think this series is over.
No.
You know, we have seen Golden State in the first 2 games in Houston. They split those. They had 2 games, and we act like they played 5 games in Oakland, and Houston won 4 of them. Right. No, they played 2 games, and Houston won 1 of them. They split that. So this team has played the best basketball we've seen in the NBA for 4 years. All right, this series is not over with. The beginning of this game becomes so important for Houston and for Houston's role players.
I mean, not only is the series not over, I would say, much like I felt in Game 4, that it was a must-win for the Rockets, in Game 5, the pressure's on Houston. This is a game that Houston, I don't want to say, it's not a must-win like Game 4 was.
Yeah, but I like to stay away from the pressure question because I don't want to get into playing the game. There's pressure on everyone.
Sure, okay, so
with Golden State being the champ and them giving the game away, as Draymond said, there is significant pressure on the players playing.
Yeah.
And what about Steph not showing up but the 3rd quarter of the last 2 games? You don't think as a 2-time MVP there's not significant pressure on him?
So remove the word pressure. Let me explain what I'm talking about, the stakes of it. If we're here tomorrow morning and Houston has won Game 5, I do not think anyone will be saying series is over. Golden State, no chance they win 6 and 7. If Golden State wins Game 5, I think most people will feel, okay, this thing's going to end in 6. They're going to go back to Oracle and win this series in 6. That's the point that I'm making. This is much like I thought last night was a game Boston really needed more than Cleveland did, and Boston played like it. This is a game that I think Houston needs more than Golden State. If Houston, this series is gone, Golden State, Houston, Golden State, Houston. Nobody's won back-to-back games. Golden State also...
Yeah, I would argue that because if Houston wins, or if they're leading most of this game, you said this is the first real pressure Golden State has? If that's true, this would be the first time they've really been down, and do they start to think, you know something, Houston might be better than us? And if that's the first time, it's more important than for Golden State if that happens.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
No, it absolutely makes sense. I think that the Warriors have a belief of themselves that is not going to be shattered or waver unless they lose.
Look, I have a guy I was associated with, knowing his name's Buster Douglas. He pulled off one of the greatest upsets in the history. Columbus, Ohio guy. He thought he could beat Mike Tyson. But you know when he really thought it? When he saw Mike Tyson on the ground, his mouthpiece out of his mouth. That's when he really believed it. Houston, if they can get Golden State down, I know they think they can. I know the owner thinks they can. I know their analytics think they can. But until it happens and they see it,
Well,
I believe that to be critical for them.
Just to them, when KD and Steph play and they lose, Warriors are 23-1 the next game.
The next game.
Yep. Coming out, well, that was